Do not be afraid, Abram. The story of Abram, later to be called Abraham, is foundational to the Muslim, the Jewish, and the Christian faith. You see, Abram was chosen by God. Abram, married to Sarai, was chosen to be the forefather of what was going to be the Israelite people. Abram's descendants were to be as many as the stars in the sky. Already in chapter 12, God promises Abram that he will be made into a great nation. And while Abram is traveling through the Canaanite land, God tells Abram that this land will someday belong to his descendants. Here in chapter 15 of what Maya just read for you, Abram and Sarai had already moved into distant lands after God instructed them to leave their old lives behind and to move into the unknown. By this point in Abram's story, they had become so wealthy that, and I quote, "The land could not support Abram and his nephew Lot while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great." Abram had even gone out and defeated a group of kings that had raided the city of Sodom and refused to take any of the goods. Abram was loaded. He was all set. Except for one teensy tiny problem. He and Sarai had no children. None. And they were old, like in their 80s. And now the 80s might be the new 40s today, but this was a different time, different living conditions. And even today, 80 isn't exactly childbearing age, now is it? Do not be afraid, Abram. Those were God's words to Abram. I can't help but think that if I were in Abram's situation, I would probably say something like this to God. "That's great, God. I'm so glad I don't have to be afraid, but could you tell me how exactly we're going to reach this great promise of yours? How will my descendants be as multiple as the stars in the sky? Time's ticking away here. Fine, I'm not afraid, but I sure am anxious." You see, God certainly did talk to Abram. God made herself visible to Abram in many ways, through success, through visions, through conversations, through messengers, through physical appearances. But God did not explain the details of the plan that Abram was to trust in. Abram had literally picked up his life and moved everything because God had told him to do so. Now Abram was to stand by patiently, trusting that he will have a biological heir, despite the fact that he and Sarai were up there in their age. And yet, God says that Abram's descendants will be as many as the stars in the clear, dark sky. Picture it. Imagine standing on a hill, no artificial lights around you, no cloud in the sky, just darkness. All-consuming darkness. And the stars. So many little glimmers of light in the sky that they do actually help you see something in this darkness. The stars that we use to guide our way. Who here has seen Disney's Moana? Moana and her people, probably the Polynesians, they traveled the vast oceans and were guided in part by the stars. And they did this long before we had technological devices to show us the way. Adam's descendants were to be as many as the stars in the sky. They were to bring light and guidance into this world. But Abram had no children, and he was old. Do not be afraid, Abram. Do you remember your first day at a new school, or maybe the first day at a new job? Did any of you ever move into a new town, a new state, maybe even a new country? Do you remember what that period leading up to this big change in your life felt like? Anxious, yeah. There's usually, when your life is about to change, there's usually a big mixture of feelings. Anticipation, excitement, joy, curiosity, mixed in with a good dose of anxiety, doubt, fear, longing for how it used to be. There's safety, a sense of safety in the status quo and how things are known to be. I remember back in Switzerland, I moved and I switched schools in the middle of 6th grade. I had spent 1st through 6th grade up to this point with the same 20 to 25 classmates and just 2 teachers. Heck, I knew some of my classmates from kindergarten. But my dad went and got himself a new job, and off we went and moved into the suburbs. And I had to go into a new class in the middle of a year, into a class of kids that had known each other since kindergarten, just like it had been the case for me. I was so scared. And I was so sad to leave my friends behind. I was even worried about my walk to school. I mean, I just needed to take a left, a right onto the main road, then go down the hill until I got to the farm, and I could smell the cows at the farm, so it's not like I was going to miss it. And then take a left, and I would already be able to see my school. But what if I got terribly confused and lost my way in this new town? What if no one in school liked me? They already had their friends. But I remember my parents telling me not to be afraid. And I didn't know the next step in the plan. I just knew that I had to walk to the farm, turn, march into school, and take it from there. I saw the stars on my horizon, making new friends in a new hometown, and keeping in touch with my old friends. Even though I didn't know how I would walk this path, I could see the stars at the end of it. Do not be afraid, Rebecca. I was afraid, though, despite my parents' assurances that all would be fine. I was afraid. But Abram was afraid too. Throughout his story in Genesis, Abram shows fear and makes mistakes. Terrible mistakes at times. And even here in chapter 15, Abram talks back at God. God promises Abram great reward, but Abram says, "You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir." Abram is essentially saying to God, "What good is your reward if I have no one to pass it on to?" And even after God says to Abram that his descendants will be as many as the stars in the sky, Abram still says, "O sovereign Lord, how can I know?" All of this doubt, fear, and anxiety after God came to Abram in a vision and said, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield." Although Abram continued to have his doubts and he never quite rid his fear of change or the fear of the unknown, Abram did the best he could. Abram held on to God and God's promises as best he could. And because Abram walked into the unknown, trusting that God knew the details of the plan, Abram and Sarai did conceive in their old age. Because Abram took the leap of faith, not just once, but over and over again, one step at a time, not giving up, even in instances when it seemed like he was going backwards a bit. Because Abraham took the leap, the rest of the Torah follows. Because Abraham dared to imagine change, his life changed. And because Abraham went along with the unknown, Israel became a people. Because Abraham was faithful enough to follow God's call, he changed and became Abraham. Just as Sarai changed and became Sarah. Because Abram was brave enough to go a new route, we all have been changed by his story. Muslims, Jews, and Christians alike. As you all know, I am once again in a moment of transition. I was offered a job opportunity that was quite impossible to turn down. I did try to talk my way out of it. I wasn't ready to leave this community. I wasn't ready to say goodbye to this cool group of teens. I hadn't done everything I wanted to do in this position. Besides, what does it mean that a part of me is so excited about going into full-time administrative work and to give up my Sunday morning role? Doesn't that go against my sense of calling from God? Should I be worried? Should I be unnerved by how okay I am with all of this? While I was contemplating this decision on whether or not to take the full-time job and leave Payson Park, fear and uncertainty took up a lot of space in my mind. But I prayed, and the answer did not come right away. But as I kept praying, I became calmer. The anxiety level went down enough where I could open up to God. Do not be afraid. But things will be different. Do not be afraid. What will people think? Do not be afraid. What does this mean for my future? Do not be afraid. I kept hearing it until I believed it. And that's not to say that fear is a thing of the past or that I will never again doubt. I, like Abraham, will make mistakes and will return to fear and anxiety and doubt. But I hope and trust that whenever fear and doubt about change in life will overtake me again, that I will remember that time when I changed schools in the middle of 6th grade. I didn't know how I would manage to make new friends and stay in touch with my old ones. This was before cell phones, after all. But today I know that one of my kindergarten friends will be my bridesmaid, and some of my friends from the new school by the farm with the cows are going to fly in all the way from Switzerland to attend my wedding. Although I didn't know how I would do it, new friendships were made, and old friendships were kept alive. The next time I struggle with fear and doubt about change in life, I will look into the night sky. The stars will remind me, and you, that God always had a plan. That was true for Abraham, as it is still true for us today. So whether or not we understand where we're going or how we will get there, remember to look at the stars. Do not be afraid. Amen.
Amen.